thank you very much for your time and participating in this online summit on solutions for a regenerative living. So this is just a conversation on what's been happening at Sandele. So just to begin with, Maurice, could you tell us about Sandele, how Sandele started, and then how it has become, especially looking at the COVID-19 challenges that we've been having?
Yes,
thanks.
Surely. Well, we started off, Jerry and I, my wife, running a hotel, an eco-retreat hotel that was off-grid and was very sustainable. We used very low-cost material, used a minimum of cement, glass, wood, and that kind of thing. And we ran that quite successfully for some years. We've always been involved and interested in community development. And from the very beginning, when we went to Africa in 1997, we involved ourselves with British universities and were in those days very involved with ecotourism and responsible tourism. And that led us then to build this eco-retreat hotel. And during that time, we felt that it was appropriate for us to perhaps shift the focus a bit away from the hotel and more onto a charity. And so in 2015, we set up the Sandele Foundation. The hotel was called the Sandele Eco Retreat, and now I am the chair of the Sandele Foundation. We have a group of board members, and we've been running there for 6 years. And from the beginning, we were very keen and interested in running EDEs, Ecovillage Design Education programs. We ran our first EDE in 2014, I beg your pardon. The second one was in 2016. And we subsequently ran one in 2019, in late November 2019. And we also, in addition, run 10 short eco-village trainings. Very often it's difficult to find the funding for full month-long EDEs. And so we've done, as I say, 10 short eco-village trainings, and they've been very successful. We've tended, perhaps slightly unusually, to focus not on gathering as many people as we can from different parts of Africa or different parts of the world, but much more on specific villages. One of the things that we found all along is that unless you have a reasonable group of people coming from one place, it's quite difficult for just one or two people to go back to their village or their town and to have much influence. And so in 2014, for instance, we made sure that we had 26 people from the village of Kartong, which is the village closest to the Sandele Eco Retreat Hotel. And in addition, we had a few people from overseas. And we found that was very effective because out of that first EDE came what was called the Kartong Eco Village Network. And the participants formed that organization in order to take forward the learning that they've had from the EDE. Similarly, in 2016, we actually recruited people from 8 villages in the Gambia and 3 more in Casamance in southern Senegal, which is very close to where we are in Kartong. And that also has worked extremely well. And our French colleagues in Casamance have continued to do a lot of work in the area of eco-village development, permaculture training, and so on. And then in 2019, we had a fairly unique multilingual EDE because we had international participants coming from Finland, Italy, France, and Spain. And they also invited people from a couple of Senegalese villages, or one Senegalese village and another in which country was it? Anyway, another French country. And so we had the simultaneous translation going on for a good deal of the time. And that also worked really very well. So our origins have been in running Ecovillage design trainings. However, we've also branched out and we've run summer camps for young people, which are focused a bit more on either entrepreneurship or on climate change. And these have also been really very successful. And bringing it a bit more up to date, we are now involved with several programs, one of which is improving farming skills. And I'll let David talk a bit more about that in a moment. And we've also set up other organizations like the Turtle Conservation Program and another one called Peer to Peer, which involved local people, Gambians, being involved in trainings which were for students coming from Kansas State University and also from Brighton University. We've worked with these universities over now a very long time. With Brighton University, we've been involved with them for probably, well, I think 15 years, something like that. So that's a long answer to a short question. And I hope I haven't gone on for too long. Linda, we can't hear you. Linda, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, Maurice. I'm saying that's actually perfect. Our interest is more to learn the whole story of how Sandele started and how everything else became up to today. So this is interesting to connect with your personal story, how you started with the Eco Retreat Center and now it has grown into something bigger than this. So if you feel there's something else that you want to talk about that's related to your story, the passion, the drive, where it started from, you're actually very free to share this. This is a conversation that you're sharing with the world in terms of how this sustainable and resilient center started.
Okay, well, we're going back then quite a long way because I met up with Jerry in the mid-90s and she was at that stage working as a senior manager in the social care world, local authority social services. And I, after a fairly long career in local and national government in the social services, had become a freelance consultant. And I met Jerry while I was doing that job, went to her authority to help with a particular project. And subsequently, we decided that we wanted to do something different. And so somewhere around 1995, we went away for a long weekend to the countryside and sat down and did our life plan. And we eventually ended up with the decision that we wanted to continue to work with people because that's the thing we do well. And at the same time, we wanted a life where we got a bit more away from the care of disabled people and children and so on, and had something a bit different. And we decided that it would be good if we could bring together people from around the developed world together with people from the developing world for a joint mutually successful learning experience. And we decided after our weekend that we would seek that place in Africa. And so we eventually settled on the Gambia. And in 1997, Jerry opened the first hotel, which was not the Eco Retreat Hotel, but was a hotel we leased. And at that time, I was the director of a charity in the UK, which was bringing young people from a variety of developing countries to the UK for a multicultural education program. And so we were bringing people from Zambia, Thailand, various other, Nepal, various countries around the world. And because the charity at that time was in a very delicate stage, I decided that I couldn't actually leave. And so very late in the day, Jerry had to end up running their first hotel on her own. She'd never worked in Africa. She had never run a hotel, and so she had quite an interesting experience for the first couple of years. And I then joined her on the just after the 1st of January 2000. And so we've been together full time, as it were, in the Gambia for 21 years. But previous to that, there was a 3-year period when other things were happening. So our story is quite a long one. We've got quite a lot of experience now. And I could go on and talk at some point about some of the issues that have arisen for us during the story since 2000.
Wow, thank you so much, Maurice. I think that's an important part of where the story began and where things are at now. So yeah, that's interesting. So now looking at where you've started from in the 90s until now, and then with the COVID-19 setting in 2019, now you're in the UK. What do you take out of the crisis that COVID-19 brought? What has been challenging for you? And in the process, what is the gift that you got out of this whole period from the when COVID-19 started?
Well, I think we had a very difficult period because over the last several years in the Gambia, you may know that, you surely do know that the situation was very problematic in that, first of all, the country's tourism program on which the country's income depends greatly collapsed when Ebola came along. That was in 2015, 2016. And then a bit after that, we'd had a dictatorship from 1994. We had President Jammeh, and that period of presidency came to an end between 2016 and early 2017. And it was a very highly political period. So even before COVID came along, the country was suffering a lot from the disastrous end, really, of tourism. It virtually ended completely. And so when COVID then came, we were already, as a foundation, fairly devoid of income. And we had a period, really, I think, during the first part of 2019 and 2020, rather, when we were unable to do a great deal. We focused, actually, on setting up a demonstration garden. We're very fortunate in that the foundation has been allowed to use a big area, or biggish area of land at the Sandele Eco Retreat Hotel. One of the parts of the story I didn't tell you is that from 2018, we actually withdrew from direct management of the Eco Retreat and let it to tenants. And along with Ebola, and along with the political upheaval, and along with COVID-19, we've had a pretty disastrous time with our tenants. And so that also has not been easy over the last couple of years. However, we used that time in 2020 in particular to be negotiating with a particular organization, the International Trade Center. And during that time, we were kind of negotiating to set up the program that we called Improving Farming Skills. And I could go on to talk about how I believe eco-villages kind of fit into rural Africa, because I think the classic eco-village design education, while it's highly valuable, is much more, first of all, it's Eurocentric, but also it caters more for people at an educational level, which is quite difficult, I think, to impose or to bring into rural villages. Not that I'm saying there's any lack of intellect in African villages. There's a huge amount, but in its present form, I think the Eco Design Education program needs to be revisited. And what we have been focusing more on is engaging people in eco-villages training, but also emphasizing the kind of livelihoods aspect, the potential that there is to improve farming productivity and therefore incomes and therefore employment. And in a country where 70% of all the women in the country are engaged in subsistence farming, that's an important area to work at. And also the Gambia has a very high level of unemployed youth, as do many African countries. And so we have been really trying to focus some more on those kind of things. And so our approach to the ED has been very highly practical. We've tried to incorporate as many practical demonstrations of techniques and different practices in order to make it relevant to our local context.
Wow, Maurice, you brought in very interesting points here. Yeah, I liked the aspect that you brought in on the eco-village concept being Eurocentric, and I would really want you to speak a bit more on that. And then you also brought in another issue on the changes that came in 2018, where you said you've handed over, I don't know whether it's handing over or there's a transition where you've brought in tenants. So I would also want to know how that has been working in terms of the whole process of Sandele and the communities, the linkages with how you started Sandele and what you wanted to see, if you could possibly help with clarifying that.
Yeah, well, going back a bit then into the way in which we set up the first EDEs. As I've said, the first one was focused very much on the local village of Khartoum. During the EDE, we invited the Minister of Tourism and Culture to come and do the presentation for the certificates for participants. And he listened to what had been happening, and he was so enthusiastic about it. He said, I want this to happen again next year. And so he and his colleagues and he were then instrumental in bringing in an Islamic organization called the CDC, and they funded the next EDE in 2016. However, one of the criteria was that it had to be a multi-country training. And so we actually then invited the participants from 3 Senegalese villages, and also we brought in some guys from Guinea-Bissau. David, incidentally, comes originally from Guinea-Bissau, and so I think he was very pleased to see some of those guys. And it was a very good EDE, and so we've tended to be ready and open to have a group of people coming from another country or another village. And so carrying that through, in 2019, we actually had 4 people that came from a village in David. Remind me of which country they came from. I'm being very stupid here.
They came from Guinea-Conakry. Sobata, Guinea-Conakry.
Guinea-Conakry, of course, yes. How I managed to forget that, I don't know. Anyway, we had a French woman who then acted as the interpreter and also raised the funds to bring those 4 people from Guinea-Conakry. And we have continued to have a 2019 EDE WhatsApp group, and there's still fairly frequent messages going backwards and forwards. There's been a little bit of sponsorship by one of the European participants of one of the guys who wanted to set up his farm. And so the benefits of the EDEs have continued. And I think one of the things to say a bit more about our approach is that we have wanted to encourage the participants to set up their own small businesses. And in that, we've been relatively successful. One woman has turned out to be a serial entrepreneur. She's very productive, she's very active, she's very good, and she is focusing very heavily on moringa and moringa products, and now has a very good business and has managed to organize some very creative packaging for her goods, and is now selling to some extent overseas. And of course, one of the difficulties in a country so dependent on tourism is that if that industry goes, some of your business opportunities go as well. But other people have set up their own farms, and David wasn't quite connected with the EDE. He also has pigs and has aspirations to do other things. He wants to set up a bakery. And so we've had other people setting up banana plantations, and David might remember one or two other things. Or another guy is very keen to set up his own graphic design and graphic design studio with other services, those kind of electronic services as well. And so we're able, as it were, I think, to create opportunities for people to undertake activities which eco-villages need, or which are appropriate and relevant to eco-villages. One of the things I think we've been more successful at is creating a relatively large number of people who are very aware of eco-village principles, eco-village practices, and have found individually that it's actually difficult, even in a village of relatively small size, to affect eco-village principles and practices quickly or in any rounded kind of way. It's much more a question of people practicing their own thing and that having an influence on other people. And I think one of the areas that we are currently focusing on is permaculture. And David will talk a bit about improving farming skills, so perhaps I should not say more about it. But on the EDE front, we have trained somewhere around 350, 400 people in Ecovillage Design, either through the month-long or short Ecovillage trainings. And so we've drawn on those participants then to be training other people. And a very good example of that, two examples actually. One is Football for Peace, and the other one is improving farming skills, where people are now facilitating and acting as trainers in training others in the kind of activities that I've been describing. So I don't know whether you'd now like David to say a few words. He's been sitting very patiently while I ramble on. And perhaps you'd like him to say a few words about improving farming skills, Football for Peace, turtle conservation, and anything else you'd like to.
Yeah, maybe for David as part of the Sandele team, it would be nice to share more about what Sandele has evolved to now, since you've shared a lot in terms of where Sandele started from, and then also the passions and what drives the people within Sandele.
Well, good morning. And my name is David Mane, and I am from Katong. I work with the Sandele Foundation. Yes, I am now the director of the foundation. So I actually originally came from Guinea-Bissau, like Maurice said. My parents are actually from Guinea-Bissau, but I am a born Gambian. And I am from the Balanta tribe, and they form the minority in Katong. And it's been a difficult moment for me and my tribe in terms of when it comes to development of the community. In most of the cases, we are being left behind, and we have not been involved fully, only when it comes to heavy work that have to do with manpower, because that's what we are known for in most of the cases, until I was opportune to be part of the ED in 2014. And this has changed my horizon in terms of how I see things and how I deal with other people. So in the 2014 ED, where I was opportune to be a participant, this is an ED that was done for one community, and I have been living in this community for a long time. And all of these participants that we've met in the ED, some of them we just see each other in the road and just pass by. We don't even have time to share or connect with each other. And being together in the ED for a period of 1 month has given us an opportunity to begin to look at each other from a different perspective. And that has helped us to create a network, a strong network of that we call KEN. And before the ED itself, me and myself never visited each other with these people that we've shared a room for a month. And after the ED, that connection has begun, and we are able to go to each other's compound, sometimes in fact share meals, which never happened before. Some of them we form a team and we are playing together. So with that new way of seeing things and seeing that we've been missing a lot from each other because we've been seeing each other as enemies. And that has given us the power, the zeal to go out and also make sure that all these things that we have learned, other communities are also able to benefit from it. And as a network that we formed at the time, which is called PCAN, which is Cartoon Ecovillage Network, we've been dipping hands into our pocket and going out to other communities to inspire them to become ecovillage. This is even before we had the 2015 EDE. And then when we had the 2015 EDE, with our inspiration and also because then we are still young in terms of ecovillage development. So we are just assisting to see how we could help communities to transform to become ecovillages. So with that inspiration and with the coming of 2015 ED, where we added other communities, like Maurice said, 8 communities in the Gambia and other 3 in the southern part of Senegal. After which we've also formed the People's Coast Ecovillage Network. And then we started going out to do community feedback to inspire people more about ecovillages, because we've seen the power of ecovillage and what it can do, starting from Katong as a community and also to the other surrounding communities. So that has been, for me, that has been a major impact in my life, and that has given me the zeal to continue to work and aspire to see more development of ecovillages in the Gambia. In 2015, I was opportune to start working with the foundation, the Sandele Foundation. I started as a media personnel. So we deal with the graphic work and design and so on. And then in 2018, I moved to the Sandele Eco Retreat, and I worked with them as their financial admin. 2019, I came back to the foundation and continue working with them until my former boss, who's Simon, maybe you might know him. Simon Jiba, yeah, and then I took over the foundation as a director, as a president at the moment. Yeah, so that's a bit of my history from where I came from up to now.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe as a follow-up to what you've just shared now, the transformation that happened to you through coming together through the Ecovillage development, the EDEs. So since our lives are actually shaped by stories, what stories are you telling yourselves now as a collective? You said you've built quite a number of networks. So what are these stories and what are you imagining within these circles and these groups?
So what we are imagining within these circles and the group is to see that interconnectedness, that we begin to see each other as one, recognizing that in every single individual, there is something that we can always learn from each other. And there is power when we come together, we could move things in a much more quicker way and a powerful way.
And so how do you see these many small collectives or the different collectives becoming probably in the next year to 5 or so in terms of the living solutions that Sandele is sharing with the world?
So Sandele Eco Retreat mostly is, like Maurice said earlier, is an eco retreat. And one of the things that we're preaching most is caring for our environment, building our soil. And this has been some of the things that we've carried on on board as a team. And right at the moment where we are now, we've created a lot of awareness in terms of our environment. And so we've created a lot of awareness in terms of environment, and people now, not even us in the network, but people that we have inspired are moving out and challenging some of the environmental damages that are happening. Like at the moment, we have fish factories all over the coastline, the Chinese fish factories that are just catching fish anyhow. And the waste of the fish are then thrown into the beach, that are littering the beach, and the beach are becoming dirty and smelling, which is not good for our health. And also the people that we inspire, some of them has gone ahead to begin to form their own gardens and are producing their food. One of them in Senegal has a kindergarten school where he teaches children about permaculture. So in the future, like in the next 20 years, I'm seeing the more youth being inspired to move towards environmental protection and also building their soil to be able to produce foods that will be able to keep them sustainable. So when COVID struck, like any other organization, we as a foundation have been affected in so many ways, and up to an extent that we have to lay our staffs because we don't have enough capital to be able to carry on with them. But it also gives us an opportunity to begin to write projects, to focus our energy in some of the areas that we have not been able to explore in a longer time. And this period has given us an opportunity to write projects. One of the outcome of the project was the improving farming skills project that we wrote to ITC, and it was improved. So in the Gambia, almost 65% of the populations are farmer, and out of the 65% of the population that are farmer, 75 of it are women farmers. And most of these women don't have a piece of land where they'll farm, or they lack knowledge in terms of doing farming, and yet still they produce almost 3/4 of the food that is being consumed by the Gambian population. So improving farming skills coming over was more of giving them a new ideas or new farming, teaching them new farming techniques on how they could improve their seasonal and yearly income or harvest. So the program was designed to take place for 3 months, for a period of 3 months, and it trained over 120 women farmers in 3 regions out of the 5 regions in the Gambia. So one of the outcomes that came out from the trainings, or some of the issues that were coming out was lack of land. And there's no way you can do farming if you don't have a piece of land. So what we are talking about with the women is more of how do we look for ways, or how do we come together as women farmers to begin to form cooperatives in a way that we will be able to purchase land for ourselves and not depend, because most of them depend on land that are borrowed to them, and then they cannot develop them to a certain extent as they want. If they start developing the land, like growing trees, the owner of the land, when the land start developing, will just come and take the land away from them. So it was more of giving them ideas on how they could acquire land, and also if they have a small space, how can we try to use the new farming techniques that is happening now, that we could maximize with that small space that we have and grow something that we could eat and also have something to sell.
Wow, thank you, David, for that. Just to build up between you and Maurice, would you probably tell me, as you imagine, what an alternative system would look like in terms of the economy, the social, the culture?
Yeah.
You want to see, because you mentioned quite a number of challenges that the government is facing.
Yeah, well, even before we started the Improving Farming Skills, one of my preoccupations has to do with the way of the no-till issue. And so we've been proposing to the women that they consider adopting a raised bed farming system or a deep bed farming system. And another smaller point, but nevertheless important, is that virtually the only tool that the women have is a short-handled hoe. And so I've been trying to bring in some other tools, simple tools, cheap tools, but things like long-handled hoes, broad forks, which you can aerate the soil without disturbing it too much. And we're also teaching the women how to make biochar as an additive to their compost, how to ensure that their ground is covered at all times because of the temper differential between bare and covered land. We'll be talking about rice intensification systems and new ways of developing rice fields. And so there is now also, I think, the next step is to really look critically with the women farmers at soil biology. There's a growing recognition that NPK fertilizer is very expensive and does terrible things to the soil as opposed to making plants grow better. And that really, you feed the soil, you don't feed the plant. And that's the focus that we should have. And so there's now, I think, from our point of view in our future improving farming skills programs, going to be a lot more focus on things like effective microorganisms, bringing in biofertilizers and bioinoculants, so that we're encouraging people to also undertake vermicomposting, this kind of stuff. And because no one woman is going to do all of those things, in terms of the economy of the future, I'm hoping that if all of these techniques can be seen to be helpful in terms of improving productivity, improving quality, improving nutritional content of what's grown, there will be a steady growth in people wanting to act differently in terms of how they approach treating their soil. And if that really does take off, there's then going to be a number of small industries which have to do with people only making biochar and only making soil inoculants and only making effective microorganisms and then selling those products to their local people. And that's the kind of way in which I think we can begin to develop villages. And the other end of all this is that a lot of the things that people grow are no longer the things that their grandparents used to grow. And very often the nutritional value and the medicinal value and the health value of many of the things that their grandparents grew was better than perhaps the hybrid seeds, etc., that people have to grow these days because in some cases governments say they can't grow any other seeds. And so from an economic point of view, I think there's so much opportunity coming along. And we need to be almost, as it were, saying, go back to the future. You know, the future is much wedded in your past as it is in any fancy ideas that are going to come from me. In terms of all the books I read about these things, etc. And there's a lot of indigenous action and practice that we need to go back to. And then the other element, I think, is we need to somehow help women to understand that putting trees into their landscape, particularly nitrogen-fixing trees, is very, very important. And that there are great benefits for them in different practices. So that bringing companion planting of different things together, putting nitrogen-fixing legumes around their corn, etc., being done in all sorts of places all over Africa. But in any one place, it's often quite difficult to see it happening. So from those points of view, I think we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to bring that knowledge and information to as many people as we can. And that's the job for David's future. I'm going on a bit now in years, so it's more up to him than it will be to me.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you so much for bringing these things up. So from your point of perspective, do you think we need to allow the current systems to first collapse before we can start implementing these things, or we just need to embrace these things, implement them now, and find other ways? What do you think?
Well, no, I'm absolutely certain we mustn't allow anything to collapse, because what the women are already doing is feeding their families. That's got to continue. What we're really talking about is adding value to what people are already doing. I mean, women farmers are extremely skilled at doing what they do. They're not currently as much in possession of some of the information and knowledge, the kind of things I've been talking about. A lot of the work that's been done on soil science is only really coming to the fore now in the last like 10, 15 years. And so everything takes time. And so it's a question of gradually, slowly adding into these things. One of the other issues, however, I think there is for a country like the Gambia is that at the present time, women tend to grow much the same things at much the same time. So there is a glut. And so obviously we do talk about food processing of your surpluses. We do talk about what kind of products you can then turn those fruits and vegetables into. And all of that is good. We're also now talking about being able to increase the quantity and the quality of what's done using some of the techniques I've referred to. However, at the moment, all of the food in the Gambia doesn't get exported. It's sold locally. And there is an issue. If so much more quality and quantity is going to be possible from this new way of operating, or not new way, but a slightly different way of operating, there's going to be an even bigger surplus. And what's anybody going to do about it if you're only selling to each other effectively? And although obviously the growth of towns means that there are some good markets there as well. So it needs action, I believe, at a national level to have a farming exporting policy, a policy that ties in what's happening at ground level with what is needed at a national level in order to increase the value of those products, both outside as well as inside the country, so the overall prosperity of the country can improve. And if we're going to be more easily able to feed the nation in terms of what we're doing, and at the same time the population is increasing, we may end up with more young people not doing very much because they don't need to do much more. So, you know, there are all sorts of issues around that we've really got to grapple with. And in the Gambia in particular, where there's virtually nil exports of food products. And so that's another area I think that we're interested in, at least I'm very interested in. And I think it's the kind of thing that we will talk to and can talk to women farmers and other more policy-making bodies about.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you very much for that. Then I would go to David. You mentioned something about some Chinese processing fish and throwing the waste into the water and stuff like that, which didn't seem very pleasant to me. And in a way, I would want to know from you in terms of any alternative systems that would support the economy, the culture, what they would look like.
I mean, the Chinese fish factory was according to the government, was to create employment opportunity for the youths in the country. And with that, it comes with so many health hazards, like in terms of the smell, the disposal of the waste that is used to produce the fish, to process some of the fish that they will catch from the sea. Those wastes were meant to be treated, but these Chinese factories are not treating they're not treating the waste as they're supposed to. And the government is not following suit to make sure that all the agreements that have been signed with the Chinese are being implemented. And secondly, the communities where these factories are operating are not benefiting as they're supposed to. And some of the fishermen that are brought, because most of the fishermen that caught this fish are all from Senegal, have become mostly notorious criminal within the communities. And like for a recent case that happened in Sanyang in one of the communities where there was a fish meal, one Senegalese strollers, one of them went to steal at the compound of that guy. And then the guy came out and was chasing after him. What he did was to stand and stab the guy to death. And then this sprouted chaos within the community, and all the youths came out and they were very angry and had to burn the police station and went to the fish mill and also looted the place and collected some money. Oh. This is because cases have been happening, like according to the indigenous of the people of Sanyang, such cases have been happening in the community and I've been taking them to the police station. But the police will not push it to a certain extent. They will just go and they say, this is where we can stop. We can no longer move this case forward. And that has been in the minds of the youths, and with the death of the guy, that has made them to do so many things. And I think the way forward here is for the government, at the moment now, where things are because it at this peak, is for the government either to revoke the license from the Chinese factory or follow on the agreement that has been signed for the Chinese to begin to treat all the waste that is being released to the sea. Because when these wastes are released into the ocean, you will see dead fish. After a few days, you'll see dead fishes coming out. And they will all litter the beaches. And these are the very beaches that are attracting tourists to come into the Gambia, which is actually the second income generating activities in the country. So if this continues, things will just get worse.
So maybe from that same perspective, how would an empowered community-led action look like? Because you are a concerned citizen, and I'm sure there are many other young people, like you're saying, who had to go to an extreme of burning the police station and stuff like that. So how would an empowered community-led action for the same scenario look like in a space where we say, okay, the community is taking action, and maybe this is what it would look like?
I think what it would look like is more when we have the government, which is actually the center body, and then you have the Chinese factory, and then you have the community as a whole having a say on what is happening at the factory. Going from time to time and monitoring and making sure that what is being agreed between the community, the government, and the Chinese factory is what is happening. Because what we are seeing now, even the people within the community, if they want to go and visit the factory, they are being denied from entering. Because the Chinese are afraid that they will see some of the activities that they are not meant to be carrying that they are doing and no report. So it's a matter of the community and the Chinese factory coming together and having an agreement and allowing them to make sure that all that is being agreed upon is being carried out.
Thank you, David. It looks like, Maurice, you want to say something else, because I'm sure this is a problem affecting the whole of Africa. It's not just in Gambia, where our governments, our leaders sign all these contracts, and there is no one really to be in charge or to ensure that all these signed treaties are followed. And how is it affecting the future of the youths and the countries?
Yeah. Well, first of all, David has been involved, I think, in some of the discussions which have brought together youth from the various villages. I think we need to say to people who are watching that youth in Africa is a different word to the word youth in England. A youth in England is generally not considered a youth after about 2021. In the Gambia, the usual, and probably in many parts of Africa, 35 is more often the age when you stop becoming a youth. And so some of these elderly youths have been getting together from the various villages and holding meetings to discuss these issues. And indeed, at one stage, I understood from David that the Ministry of Youth and Sports, Minister of Youth and Sports, also came and attended one of the meetings to discuss some of these social issues. And in a sense, I think David has touched on a very important point when he was referring to the difficulty that women have in gaining land. It's by bringing together people who have shared interests, who are ready to behave responsibly, to look in detail and depth at whatever the issue is, and then to put their case forward. And in the case of the Guinean farmers, that's a way forward. And similarly, I think with the Chinese fish factories, that's the kind of approach that is already, I think, in some small way being seen to happen in the Gambia. The only other thing I'd like to say is that one of the people who attended the ED turned the problem into a solution by encouraging the women to go and collect all the dead fish on the beach and turn them into compost. And that has become a very successful small-scale enterprise. And so, you know, there are some on-the-side solutions as well that might be worth pursuing.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Maurice, and thank you, David, for sharing your stories on this platform for the online summit, Living Solutions for a Regenerative World. So maybe as we just wind up this conversation, I would like to know what motivates you as probably as individuals and what motivates Sandele as a collective.
Sorry, what connects us? What passion?
No, yes, the passion. What motivates you as Maurice as an individual, and then as a collective, Sandele collective.
Okay.
Yes.
From 1971, when I went to the Alternative for Energy Centre in Wales, in England, I've become a devotee of everything sustainable. And so my passion is to try to understand what some of the potential solutions or possibilities might be. And then, if I can, to assist other people to understand those things if it's going to be helpful to them. And so I am still very keen on doing that. So I spend a great deal of time watching YouTube videos, taking down all the earls and bombarding my Gambian colleagues with things they probably would like to have the time to see, but probably they're too busy to see half of what I send them. But sharing knowledge and information is the thing really that is still my passion.
Thank you, Maurice. How about you, David?
I mean, for me, what drives me is more about my need for inner peace. Like I said in my introduction, I came from a tribe that is the minority in the community that has been sidelined for long, and being given an opportunity in an ED to able to connect with other people and also share and begin to know the things that I could learn from them, that has been my motivation, moving me to yearn for more peace and be able to connect with more people.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maurice and David. We've come to the end of our conversation. It's been very interesting being with you here, and I'm sure the whole world will enjoy this conversation and your story. Thank you very much.